Hey, what's up guys? Tougie here, back again, and today it's time to finally talk about everything that's gone down over the past few days in the NHL, now that the free agent frenzy has started to die down. I should have released this video on July 2nd, kind of glad I didn't in a way, but after the live stream on July 1st, I was just dead tired. It really screwed with my whole sleep schedule. Thank you to those, by the way, that hung out with me in the early hours of free agency this year. It was a really fun stream. The video on demand, the VOD, is up on Twitch, by the way, twitch.tv/Tougie24. I stream every night, in case you didn't know, alongside the videos. But we have a lot to talk about today. Now, I'm not going to talk about every move, but as you can tell by the tabs that are open, there are a lot of moves that I want to discuss. If I miss anything, hey, let me know down in the comments. I'll respond in kind if there's a deal you want to know about. But these are the ones that I consider to be overly significant, and that, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So what I want to start off with first are the trades, of course, and the biggest trade by far is the trade right here at the very top of the list. And, you know, let's just zoom in a little bit there. That's a little bit better. Colorado acquires Nazem Kadri, Kadri Rosen, and a third-round pick in 2020 for Tyson Barrie on 50% salary, Alex Kerfoot, and a 2026 round pick. Now, the immediate reaction to this was, it's a fleece for Toronto. I don't see it that way. Now, I will say, for the moment, the Leafs absolutely won this trade. Is it a fleecing? No. Philip Forsberg for Martin Erat was a fleecing. This is not that. From the Colorado perspective, you needed a player like Nazem Kadri. Again, they're still set up very well. $27 million available. They have a couple of players that they have to sign. But when you look at this team, obviously, you have McKinnon, you have Landeskog, and Mikko Rantanen up top, who still needs to be signed. But from there, it was a little bit shaky. And we'll be talking about Donskoy a little bit later on. But even now, with the addition of Andre Burakovsky, you needed someone like Nazem Kadri for that middle six center role. They got exactly what they needed. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, but their defense now, I really don't think it's that bad. Erik Johnson, Ian Cole, who's going to be hurt. I think Johnson's roughed up, though, too. Cale Makar. Now, look, I know he only played a couple of playoff games. I'm all in on the Cale Makar train. Cale Makar is the real deal. He absolutely is. And it doesn't take just like, oh, well, he only played 10 playoff games. He had 6 points in those 10 playoff games, by the way. You look at what he did at UMass, one of the highest scoring defensemen. Pretty much he and Adam Fox led the way there. Matter of fact, let's take a look, shall we? Because, hey, specifics are nice. NCAA, Elite Prospects and Cap Friendly. The two sites that I spend more time on than any... Oh, don't tell me the link's broken, man. Don't let the link be broken. Okay, good, it's not. It's not. So let's just take a look here at ye old player stats from last year. Tara Hirose up there. Cale Makar had 49 points in 41 games. Now, Adam Fox was above him in terms of defensemen, but still, Cale Makar is also younger, so there's that too. But in terms of point per game amongst defensemen, Adam Fox, Joe Dujak, who I'm probably butchering that, but I know he signed with Toronto, and then Cale Makar. Cale Makar is the real deal. So when you look now at that defense for Colorado, Johnson, Cole, Makar, Sam Girard, Bowen Byram, more than likely. Then you also have guys like Barbario, Kevin Connaughton. Will Kadri Rosen make the team? Of course, the thought was he was going to be a Maple Leaf this year. Nikita Zadorov needs to be signed as well. It's fine. And look, when it comes down to this trade, this obviously screams that they didn't think Ty Barrie was going to resign once his contract's up at the end of the next season. And that's really why this trade is the way it is. You can almost view this as Nazem Kadri for Alex Kerfoot and Kadri Rosen in a third for Ty Barrie in a sixth. When you look at it that way, and while the word's already out that the Leafs are negotiating with Tyson Barrie, odds are that means Jake Muzzin's gone. And if you look at the Leafs cap situation, yes, you still have overage that you have in play. You have the LTIR with Nathan Horton that is very much in play, but you still have to sign Kerfoot, Marner, and will they keep Cody Ceci? We don't know. But at the end of next year, say they do sign Marner, it's 10 or 11 million bucks. There's a decent chance that you're going to lose Muzzin or Barrie, if not both. Potentially. It's just the reality that the Leafs are facing right now. And with Colorado, why not make a move to lock down Nazem Kadri, who is still on a tremendous contract? Now, look, I'm a Bruins fan. I find it hilarious, of course, that Nazem Kadri has been suspended. Steve Dangle pointed this out in his video talking about Nazem Kadri's time in Toronto. He, or the Leafs, had played 14 playoff games in the past 2 years. Nazem Kadri suited up for 3 of them and only finished 1 of them. Of course, play, suspended, and then outright suspended. I obviously think my team benefited from that. They did. I don't know if Nazem Kadri, had he not been suspended, if Nazem Kadri plays, I don't know if the Bruins make it out of the first round this year. And of course, they went on to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final because the playoffs just work like that. Nazem Kadri is a tremendous player. Whether you factor in just point totals, which again, he's a 40 to 50, sometimes a 60-point guy. It really does depend on the role. Again, we will use the A3Z player comparison tool quite a bit today, I am sure. Again, just search A3Z player comparison tool or find CJ Totoro on Twitter. I cannot recommend this site enough, even though it is very simplistic and it's not the end-all, be-all. Of course, there are so many different ways and metrics that you can look at a player, but Nazem Kadri is a damn good hockey player, to put it in very simple terms. So when you look at this trade, again, Colorado gets what they need. They get a really good player on a really good contract. They get Kadri Rosen, who's added to the mix of an already pretty strong, young and inexperienced, but a pretty strong defense core. And they also get that 3rd-round pick back. Of course, the Leafs aren't hurting after getting a 3rd-round pick from Ottawa, but we'll talk about that in a second. For the Leafs, you get Tyson Barrie. And bottom line is, if you look at that Toronto defense right now, I still have some questions, I will admit. But Riley, Muzzin, and Barrie, tremendous. The one issue with Travis Dermott is that he's going to be out for the first month and a half, 2 months of the season, and that's going to suck. From there, though, it's a little bit rocky, which is why I don't think it's a major loss for Colorado, because when you look at Toronto, that defense still needs work. Now, a lot of their success could hinder on whether or not 2 prospects in particular are ready to go, Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren. If either of those 2 can step up and make an impact, then yeah, that Leafs defense is one of the best in the league. But for now, if you just look at who is listed on roster, Ben Harpur, Marty Marincin, Kevin Gravel, Justin Hall, Cody Ceci. It's going to be, unless Ceci gets traded, one of those, 2 of that group as your 3rd pairing next year. That, I mean, again, it's still good for the top 2 pairings, but that 3rd pairing, it's questionable. Now, of course, you could split up, members of that top 4, but I'm not sold yet. But that's not taking anything away from the Leafs here. But again, I think the Leafs win this trade because they needed Tyson Barrie so desperately. Not that Colorado didn't need Nazem Kadri, but I refuse to call it a fleece. Again, Kadri, Barrie, players that the teams needed. Of course, the big reason why a lot of people are saying this is a fleece is because of Alex Kerfoot, who, yes, is pretty goddamn good himself. Hell, like I said, you might as well view this as Kadri for Kerfoot and Tyson Barrie for a 3rd and Kadri Rosen. Now, you could argue, of course, well, that's not even close. But, again, when you think about it, if you're Colorado, you know for a fact that Tyson Barrie isn't going to come back. It's not that bad, all things considered. So, again, slight edge to Toronto, but both teams get what they need. I don't have an issue with the trade for either side. You go to the Buffalo, Jimmy Vesey for a 2021 3rd-round pick trade with the New York Rangers. And, I mean, for Buffalo, again, pretty straightforward. I mean, in terms of point totals, that is what it is. But you get a quick look at what Jimmy Vesey was last year. Offensively, pretty damn good. Everything else, meh. And you look at him over the past 3 years, it's the offense that started to develop and his own exits that have begun to drop. So it's kind of interesting to see how he's continued to develop as he's been a player. But it's a pretty straightforward trade for the Rangers. This was about moving cap for a much bigger deal. And, I mean, for the Sabres, it's not as if you can't afford them. They still have $12 million in cap space. You got some guys to sign, but nobody major. So, decent for the Sabres. And, again, for the Rangers, who we'll be talking about in just a moment, I am sure, we're going to be talking about them. It's a pretty good deal. And then we go to the other big trade on July 1st. The Leafs really kind of stole the show in a way, starting and ending the day But Connor Brown, Nikita Zaitsev, and Michael Carcone, I'm going to go Carcone, traded to the Ottawa Senators for Cody Ceci, Ben Harpur, Aaron Lucic, and a third-round pick. Now, again, for the Leafs, Cody Ceci, that's obviously, and you talk about it, for the Leafs that are known as kind of the analytics darling team, everybody knows that Cody Ceci doesn't fit the bill for an analytics-heavy team. I mean, hell, for shits and giggles, of course, the one team I thought of was, or the one player I thought of was Dion Phaneuf. That's how he compared to what Dion Phaneuf did last year in the limited amount of appearances that they had in scouting those two players. Cody Ceci's not good. So, I mean, it's rough. Ben Harpur, Aaron Lucic was an undrafted signing, so we'll see. And the third is what it is. Again, for the Leafs, it was all about moving Nikita Zaitsev. For the Leafs, it is a pretty big win because you did get a third-round pick back, and of course you went on to move your own not that much later into the day. Kind of sucks to lose Connor Brown, but the rumors were out there for months that Connor Brown was going to go too. Not that he's on the worst contract, but it was a movable deal. For the Sens, I don't hate it. They did go on to sign a couple of former Leafs, Tyler Ennis and Ron Hainsey included. I really like Connor Brown for them. We'll see if Zaitsev can turn it around. I mean, you might want to hope so, Ottawa. I mean, this deal is kind of more of, hey, well, we have Connor Brown, who's the best player in that trade. So if you judge it by that metric, Ottawa wins, but really the big winner there, of course, is Toronto to free up that cap space. And I don't know if I talked about these trades. Deloria to Anaheim's nothing. Andrew Shaw goes back to Chicago because, of course, he did. That's just what the Blackhawks do. I don't mind Andrew Shaw. I mean, in terms of point totals, he had a career high, but you look at some of the underlying numbers, and it's still not great. So it's kind of the scary thing if you're a Hawks fan, to essentially give up a second and a third for Shaw. In terms of the contract, 3 years left at just under $4 million. It's okay, but 47 points last year. I'll be intrigued to see what he does this year for Chicago. But yeah, that's an interesting one. So if you look at it from that perspective of, a 50-point guy for a second and third, pretty good. You look at those underlying numbers, what are you going to get from Andrew Shaw? Reimer dealt for Darling. Darling was immediately bought out. It ended up being a cheaper deal overall for Florida, so not a bad deal there. And the Phil Kessel trade, which I haven't talked about yet because I was going to save it for this video. Hell, I didn't even talk about the Colin Miller trade yet. There's been so much, but I knew I wanted to save it for a video. I'm sorry, but we'll talk about it more. I don't know what Jim Rutherford's doing. I feel as though he wants to be fired because what the hell. Now, look, Alex Galchenyuk, we shall see what he'll be able to provide, right? Again, he's not bad. He wasn't Max Domi this year, that's for sure. Pierre-Olivier Joseph, not a bad prospect. Former first-round pick. The big issue with him, he's tall, can't put on weight and muscle. So we'll see if he develops or not. The issue is, if you're Pittsburgh, I don't care how much Kessel didn't fit your system. I don't care that he doesn't want to play defense. I don't care if he doesn't get along with the coach. I don't care how weird he is. He is a point-a-game player. You don't trade. Obviously for Pittsburgh, Jim Rutherford feels as though the cup window's closed. That's what we'll talk about later. But it's weird because for Pittsburgh, it's a decent return. But wouldn't you rather have Phil Kessel? Especially with Crosby at the age he's at, Malkin at the age he's at? That's what you would think. But the deal with Phil Kessel, Arizona is going for it. They have some questions on that roster for sure. They have no cap space right now whatsoever. They brought in Carl Soderberg a couple of days before. They just re-signed Lawson Krause. And, can they make it? They've been the team that everyone has said for the past couple of years, this is the year they make it to the playoffs, and they still haven't. If Ranta can stay healthy, or if Darcy Kemper can play like he did down the back half of last season, and really for the majority of last season while Ranta was hurt, they have as good a shot of any to make the playoffs out of the West. But you talk about the addition of Phil Kessel. Is that enough with this core? You look at some of the ages, especially on that defense. There are going to be a lot of interesting teams to watch next year. Arizona is towards the top of that list. They have to be. But, again, for Pittsburgh, decent return. But, I'd rather have Phil Kessel. Again, if you judge it by who's the best player in the trade, it's Phil Kessel, at least for now. Colin Miller to Buffalo had a pretty bad season. So he gets dealt. It's a cheap price, really, for the Sabres if he is able to turn it around, and I think he will. I think that if you want to talk about what a steal is, what a fleecing is, that has the potential to be a bigger fleecing than the Colorado-Toronto trade by far. And speaking of Colorado, Andre Burakovsky to Washington, second and the third round pick, Scott Kosmachuk, who's looking like a career minor leaguer at this point. I like it. I mean, you shopped Carl Soderberg, and that trade's right here for Kevin Connauton in the third. You shop Carl Soderberg, who is coming off of a career year, and I like Carl Soderberg, former Bruin, of course, but coming off of actually not a career year in fairness, career year in terms of goals. He had 23 goals, 49 points. He put up 51 points in his first season in Colorado. I like Carl Soderberg a lot, but when you compare him to Andre Burakovsky, and it's not as if the Avalanche need to clear cap space at all or anything. When you compare Carl Soderberg to Burakovsky, you are essentially hoping that Burakovsky is in fact this, and that change of scenery has him truly blossom into a relatively dominant top six player. Carl Soderberg is more of a sure thing right now, but if Burakovsky can be this, if these numbers are worth listening to in terms of his possession game, if he can turn this around, they are golden, especially, with the contract he signed. I know he only put up 25 points, but you look at those underlying numbers, that could be a tremendous deal for the Avs. And you factor in McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen. You factor in the addition of Nazem Kadri and Jonas Donskoy, who was arguably the most underrated steal, really, of free agency. And we'll talk about him a little bit more later. The addition of Colin Wilson, which, you see a name like Colin Wilson and you're like, oh, how good's he? Pretty good. Pretty good. It's like, oh, former Predator, he plays in Colorado. How good's Colin Wilson? The answer is actually pretty damn good. And that's another move. That's another player that really flies under the radar. So I really like what Colorado's done. And that move, we'll see if it pans out for them. Eric Hall to Carolina was a good cheap pickup for them. And I think that pretty much covers it. I talked about the DeHaan and the Hartman moves in other videos. So there you go. Quick and easy talks about the trades there. Again, I was going to put out individual videos for a lot of this, but it's like there's no time. There's no time. So getting into the player signings. First player I want to talk about, Jason Spezza, going to Toronto for league minimum, which is $700K this year, up from $650K the prior year. Jason Spezza, for what he was making on Dallas last year, not worth it. Jason Spezza and your bottom six for league min, as he wants to go home and play for his hometown team, worth it. Absolutely worth it. Again, Jason Spezza at 7.5. Jason Spezza at $700K. Yes. And that is one hell of a deal for the Leafs, by far. And depending on how the rest of this offseason goes, what they do with Mitch Marner, it's going to be hard to deny that they're not a better team. I think Kyle Dubas has done one hell of a job. We'll just see what happens with Mitch Marner, primarily. Andre Sekera to Dallas after being bought out by Edmonton. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this one, Edmonton bought out the wrong defenseman. Now, I know Andre Sekera has had, he wasn't even tracked last year. Like, his career has been derailed by injuries. He signs for 1.5 for this year, a real prove-it deal. Now, look, I know Andre Sekera 5.5 until 2021 is rough. But when you compare him to one Chris Russell, what are you doing, Edmonton? What are you doing? It's the most Edmonton thing I think I've ever seen. It really, really is. Again, Sekera at 5.5 until 2021, Russell at $4 million until 2021. I guess take your pick, but if it's up to me, especially too because of modified no movement, no trade, whatever, or modified no trade, no movement, it's Chris Russell you kind of want to get rid of, but that's Edmonton for you. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see what Andre Sekera can do moving forward. Peter Mrazek re-signs in Carolina. Needless to say, we'll be talking about the goaltending carousel around the league. But with Mrazek, 3.125 for the next 2 years. He kind of collapsed on you in the playoffs. You had to turn to Curtis McElhinney in the Boston series. We'll see. Again, a 9.14 in the regular season. I'm not buying it personally that he's the guy. If you're Carolina, you kind of had no choice but to hope that he was the guy. McElhinney split to Tampa. Pretty good deal for him to be the backup. We still don't know what's going to happen with Louis Domingue. But I don't buy in to the Mrazek hype that he had, justifiably so, gotten around 2013 through 2015 and really 2015-16. But since then, that relationship with Detroit soured. I don't know if he's the guy for Carolina, but unless you were going to go for a Robin Lehner, you kind of didn't really have any other option. So, big-time prove-it contract for Peter Mrazek. He's 27. This is pretty much it for you. If you don't prove that you are a number one goaltender in this league, you'll never make this amount of money again, unless you're Cam Ward magically, and you'll get paid even more. Isn't that unreal that Cam Ward made $3.5 million, I believe it was, with Chicago this past season, and that's all Mrazek's getting? Unbelievable, Cam Ward. Interesting one at least. Valtteri Filppula back to Detroit. It's probably more than what he's worth, arguably. At least that's what you think. And you know what? I actually haven't taken a look at Flipper's numbers. Pretty good deal, actually. He had a pretty good bounce-back season. How has he been over the past 3 years, though? Not bad. Valtteri Filppula. I think that's just the, kind of the effect of him being overpaid by Tampa towards the end. But had a good season with the Islanders, and of course what they were able to do last year. And it's just kind of cool that after 6 years, he's going back to Detroit. So, not bad. Mike Smith to Edmonton. Now, Cam Talbot's in this freaking log jam of tabs here. They essentially traded places, ignoring the fact that Cam Talbot, of course, was in Philly last year. Mike Smith to Edmonton. It's a super weird move because, obviously, you're switching from one side of the Battle of Alberta to the other, but then you factor in that it's Mike Smith, and Edmonton is now paying Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen quite a bit of money. Now, Smith, it's only for 1 year, but you don't bring in Mike Smith if you're sure Mikko Koskinen's the guy. And it really just kind of sums up how bad that Koskinen contract is and still has the potential to be. That is one of Peter Chiarelli's finest bits of work right there. For Smith, it's weird, though, because in the regular season, not great. A lot of people thought Calgary would start Riddick in the playoffs. They went with Smith, and despite a .917 save percentage, you could argue he was the best member of the Calgary Flames in the playoffs, a team that just did not show up in the first round. So I don't know what to expect out of Mike Smith. Now, I can look at the Oilers roster and tell you, I don't expect them to be a playoff team. Even with Connor McDavid, we'll see what Dave Tippett can do. But there have been no major changes to this roster. They've re-signed Chason. They've re-signed Jujhar Khaira. But aside from bringing in Nygaard from overseas, aside from bringing in Thomas Jurko, who's fresh off of a Calder Cup win with the Charlotte Checkers, and who will probably get the Ty Ratty experience of playing on the top line with Connor McDavid, they haven't done much, unless you factor in Brandon Manning. So that's still not a playoff team, more than likely, unless they do go with McDavid, Draisaitl, Nuge up the middle, and they can make it work. But, yeah, just such a weird move to know that Mike Smith is now an Oiler. Speaking of which, the Thomas Jurko trade, or the signing, which we'll see. Again, he'll probably play with McDavid. Brett Connolly to Florida. The reason I bring this up is because, of course, Brett Connolly is 27 years old, despite the fact that he looks like he is 40. But, of course, the thing is, he's looked like he's been at least in his late 30s for his entire career. Here's a picture from when he was drafted. This is from Hockey's Future. Some of you will remember this website. I know I do. I still occasionally go back to it. But this was one of the initial, hey, here's where you want to go to look at scouting, essentially. It actually redirects to HF boards, which is nice. But yeah, this site hasn't been updated in many years now, so you can see that picture of Connolly from when he was drafted. He looked old then. For Florida with this deal, I don't hate it. I mean, it's good on Connolly to finally have a strong season and then to cash out. Whether or not he's worth it, I mean, if you're Florida, you're kind of hoping that 46-point season isn't a fluke. Otherwise, that can be a fairly rough contract. But of course, the Florida Panthers made another big impact signing. They have playoff aspirations, as they should. But time will tell whether or not that contract haunts them. I mean, it's crazy to think, though, that someone like Vincent Trocheck is only making a little bit over $1.2 million more. Just kind of goes to show how good that Vinny Trocheck contract is. Case and point for how Trocheck rated last year. Granted, in only 10 games, but that kind of gives you a picture of how good Vinny Trocheck is. We'll talk more about the Panthers soon. Hell, we'll talk more about the Panthers right now. Anton Stralman switches sides in Florida, $5.5 million for the next 3 years. Now, I don't hate this signing. It's tough, because if you're Florida, and we'll take a look here, because I don't want to say Stralman's point totals are irrelevant, but still, you look at this Florida defense: Ekblad, Yandel, Stralman, Matheson, Pysyk might be the guy on the outs here, admittedly, because of that contract. But you have guys like Weegar and McCoshen as well. Really, Stralman shores up that top four on that team. It makes it a hell of a lot better. Now, again, whether or not Anton Stralman's the best defenseman at this point in time, not necessarily, but you do need a puck. I mean, it's never a bad thing to have another puck mover. Another guy who can actually break out a goddamn puck. Ask Toronto how fun it is to not have multiple defensemen on their back end that can move out a puck, although that situation has certainly changed. And really, I mean, hell, let's compare him to, say, Aaron Ekblad, who, let's just see how he compares to the other big three. Certainly a better puck mover than Aaron Ekblad. Aaron Ekblad, though, one of the best shutdown defensemen in the league. We'll compare him to Keith Yandel, who had a tremendous season last year by all metrics. And, again, good puck mover, good, well-rounded defenseman for Yandel. And again, the other member of that big three would be Mike Matheson, who recently got a pretty damn decent contract extension. And again, not the best puck mover in the world, but not all that bad. Stralman's going to help out that team a lot. Now, I know, I get it. He's 32 years old. I think a lot of people feel like 32 going on 37, but I don't hate that. And, of course, they made another big addition that really helps shore things up for them. But before that, Ryan Hartman to Minnesota. I like the deal. Now, for the Wild, the big talk of the day, of course, them, getting Hartman, getting Zuccarello. We'll take a look at Ryan Hartman here now. Again, I don't hate what I've seen out of Ryan Hartman. Now, again, they tracked him when he was in Nashville, not in Philly, and I know once he got to Philly, it just wasn't a good fit overall. But it's a good, low-risk signing for Minnesota. It's a team that you think has playoff aspirations. It's tough to tell what the hell. I think I just said Philly. Meant mini, obviously. It's tough to tell what this Minnesota team is going to be. If Zach Parise is healthy, he's still a great player. I'm actually not even sure what his numbers would look like, but in terms of point totals, he's still capable. That's not ideal. But to back up my point here about him still being able to put up points when he's healthy, he might have had the quietest 60-plus point season of anybody last year. So I don't hate what they have going for them. The Zuccarello signing, yeah, I can understand your frustrations if it's an overpayment or you think the term's too much. They were tempted to trade Zucker. The Victor Rash trade was awful. It's tough to say. I don't know if I necessarily see this as a playoff team right now. I mean, obviously, you look at, say, Marcus Foligno, JT Brown, and Eriksson Ek, who, it's like, okay, what is he going to be? And how he set up last year. I'm actually intrigued to find out. Nah. I don't know what to expect from Minnesota. And for me, they are one of those interesting teams to watch next year, because that top four defensively, still very, very solid. What they do with the bottom six, I don't know. Although, Nick Seeler, I'm rooting for you. They're going to be an interesting team to watch. You have to wonder if they're done. They still have $11 million left. And that's one of the things, actually, that I wanted to talk about at the start. But you know what? We'll segue to it now. We'll talk about it now. As far as some of the top players that are still left unsigned at this point, we'll sort it by salary as opposed to cap hit. If it'll let me, it won't. That's fine. I mean, Dion Phaneuf, well, Marleau, go back to San Jose, maybe. Pominville, I mean, I'm kind of surprised in a way, and there was a talk about this with Ottawa and how they sign people. you gotta think someone's giving Jason Pominville a shot. You'd have to think that. Trouba still needs to be signed, but he will be. Joe Thornton hasn't committed to anything at this point. And for me, the one that really sticks out is Marcus Johansen. Now, we're only going into the third day of free agency, but when a player the caliber of Marcus Johansen is still on the list, I am dying as a Bruins fan for them to get rid of Backes. I don't care if it takes a first. I don't care if it takes Zaboral. I don't care if it takes Trent Frederick or Anders Bjork. Okay, Anders Bjork, maybe not. For the love of God, get rid of David Backes. Send him. And the tough thing is that he has, I believe, an 8-team trade list, so it could be tough, and it might not work out, but for the love of God, try like hell to move David Backes and bring in a Marcus Johansen on what you would have to assume would be a little bit more of a team-friendlier contract. I'm not sure if, that price is staying firm. Like, nope, this is my number. It's like, okay, well, clearly you weren't one of the top options for a lot of people despite a really strong playoffs. I don't know, man. I'm intrigued to see where he goes, and Jake Gardiner is arguably the next biggest name out there. And the fact that we really haven't heard much, apparently his list is down to 4 people at this point, for whatever the hell that's worth. But I'm intrigued to see what goes down there. Thomas Vanek is still available. Valeri Nichushkin, I would imagine, is jumping back to the KHL. But there are still some names. Patrick Maroon is still out there. It's intriguing to see some of the names that are still left at this point, where you look at some of these teams that have cap space and you have to think, like, okay, now's the time to make a move. I mean, hell, if you're Minnesota, you got Matt Zuccarello. And again, I don't hate Zuccarello. I think, despite the fact that I would have thought that Dallas would fight harder to keep him. Now, last year, from an offensive standpoint, but obviously once he went to Dallas, it looked pretty good. But if you're Minnesota, from an offensive standpoint, and we'll say your top 6 next year is Parise, Zuccarello, Zucker, Koivu, Eric Stahl, and Fiala. I mean, if you get a Marcus Johansen and say bump down Eric Stahl to third-line center, that overall team depth looking pretty damn good at that point. Johansen could play center. Or, not that they need Jake Gardiner, but Jesus Christ. Imagine you add Jake Gardiner to that defense, third pairing of Brodin and Sealer or whatever the hell you want to do. Obviously, I'm not saying those are perfect fits, but I'm just saying, you look at the high value players that are still out there. Are those prices going to start dropping even this early? There are moves to be made, and let's talk about a move that was made. Artemi Panarin to the New York Rangers. Does he deserve to be the second highest paid player in the NHL? It's tough for me to say no. It really is. Artemi Panarin is the real deal. As if you needed me to tell you that. I mean, he has been a point-a-game player for the past 2 years. He has never put up... His lowest point total was 74 points. And you look at what he did in the playoffs this year. He deserves it. He really, really does. And it's a huge get for the New York Rangers, who I'm not a big fan of naming winners and losers of free agency or trade deadlines. I mean, how could you not say that the Rangers are winners, though? You want to talk about a rebuild or a retool on the fly. It's been perfection from them the whole way out. And you look at this team now, sure, to sign Buchnevich, to sign Trouba and D'Angelo, you're going to probably have to move somebody else. The likely suspects are Kreider and Nemesnikov, which you can overcome. But the addition of Adam Fox on his ELC, the addition of Trouba, it's one hell of a team. It really is. And you look at the likes of Vitaly Kravtsov in the system. A lot of people are still high on Rykov. He doesn't have the most impressive numbers in the KHL, although, of course, points aren't everything, but still, 9 points in 47 games. We don't exactly know how he's going to translate to the NHL game. Of course, they acquired him from the Devils not that long ago. But yeah, major winners for the New York Rangers. I don't hate the deal at all. Apparently, he turned down money. He could have gotten more with Colorado and with the New York Islanders. So it's a massive win for them. There's no doubt about it. And speaking of massive wins, Ron Hainsey got a raise. Goes from making $3 million last year to making 3.5. Oh, well, the Sens need to hit the floor. Really, though? Really, though, Hainsey is the way that you're going to hit the floor. Hainsey, good defensively, can't do fuck all else. That's the way you're going to hit the floor, right? Like, you're not, I mean, hell, you clearly have an obsession with signing former Maple Leafs. Why not throw all the money in the world at Jake Gardiner? Now, I get it, and probably the reason why he is still a free agent is the injury concerns, especially over his back. Why not throw money at some of the other names that were on that list that we looked at just a few minutes ago? It does not make any sense whatsoever. That is a very Ottawa move if I've ever seen it, but good for Ron Hainsey. Big winner of free agency, Ron Hainsey. Garnet Hathaway goes to Washington, which I'll say this. We'll take another look over here. When you look at numbers like that, when you look at numbers like that, no, he was only tracked for 12 games last year. They typically like to hit 30, but when you see numbers like that, when you see 19 points last year, you probably don't expect it to be a 4-year contract. The term is the killer here. I mean, $1.5 million, fine. 4 years? 4? Why? Because he's 6'2", 210? Let me drop 40 pounds. I'll be right there for you. Give me $1.5 million a year. Goddamn. I could put up similar numbers to that, maybe. Jesus, let me get some practice in first, but goddamn. Garnet Hathaway, pretty damn big winner. Again, at the very least for Washington, it's only $1.5 million per, but that's rough. They also managed to get Richard Panik, which I will say, and I mentioned Jonas Donskoy earlier, Richard Panik isn't bad. He's not. Pretty strong defensively. Does have a habit I've seen of taking penalties, but also drawing them, so it's kind of weird in that way. But when you look at other players who were available, and the big one here, I can't type Donskoy, I've learned. When you look at, what Colorado picked up in Donskoy, it kind of makes you wonder here. With Panik getting $2.75 for 4 years, Donskoy is right here. He gets $3.9. If I'm Washington, if I want a winger who's a little bit good defensively, I pay that little bit extra to get Jonas Donskoy. Just a little bit more. So I don't hate the Panik deal. I mean, you lose Brett Connolly and get someone who's a little bit more consistent. It's not a bad way to go. But I do think there were better options, and I love this Jonas Donskoy deal. I mean, it's just under $4 million for 4 years, but again, you look at what Donskoy is capable of. One of the quieter, and really not at this point, that's not even fair to say, because a lot of people, including myself, have been singing his praises, but that's a pretty damn good pickup for Colorado. The Sebastian Aho saga. My God, there's been a lot to talk about here. I should have just made like 17 smaller videos. The Sebastian Aho saga can simply be summed up by saying Marc Bergevin essentially tempted a billionaire to spend money. And I said this on Twitter, and I stand by it. If there's anything that a billionaire loves more than making money, it is rubbing it in your face that he has money to spend. And that is exactly what Tom Dundon did, especially to the media, after the Hurricanes announced that they were keeping Sebastian Aho. It was a genius move by Marc Bergevin, getting just under a shade in terms of the compensation that it would have taken. Instead of 2 first-round picks, a second and a third, it was 1 second and a third. Very smart move on his part, although it did not work. But yeah, you don't dare a millionaire to spend money in a way that'll make him be like, sure, it showed you, didn't I? Like that's the one thing you just don't do. Maybe I've learned that as a wrestling fan over the years and seen people just be like, poke Vince McMahon and the Bears saying, spend money, you won't. Oh, he will. And then he'll let you know about it for a long, long time. So yeah, Tom Dundon had fun on Monday and Tuesday. Robin Leonard to Chicago. Apparently negotiations just broke down in a real bad way with the New York Islanders, which is a shame after Leonard's redemption story. But he has a golden opportunity here to become the Chicago Blackhawks goaltender for the rest of his prime. Now, obviously, Corey Crawford is still there, and his future's uncertain due to injury concerns. But Robin Lehner could very well be the guy to replace him. 1-year deal. The big thing here is seeing how Robin Lehner plays this year and what happens with Corey Crawford, who is on an expiring deal. But Lehner would have to be pretty goddamn abysmal to not have the Blackhawks starting role next season. And I think that's what it is. I mean, you have Lehner and Crawford as a tandem for 1 more year, and then you go Lehner, big money deal, and Delia as the backup, and that's not a bad way to go if you're Chicago. Not at all. And as far as whether or not they can make it back into the playoffs this year, I'm intrigued to see. I mean, obviously Seabrook and Keith aren't what they used to be. Calvin DeHaan's going to miss time at the start of the year due to injury. We don't know what they're going to be able to get out of Olli Maatta. Connor Murphy is overpaid. Eric Gustafsson had a phenomenal season last year from an offensive standpoint. As you see, Connor Murphy's numbers there, and then Eric Gustafsson from an offensive standpoint. Really from a defensive standpoint as well. Eric Gustafsson was one of the best defensemen in the league last year. Just quiet, of course, because he was on a Chicago team that didn't make the playoffs. Can they bounce back and make the playoffs this year? Yeah, they very well could, especially if Dylan Strome can have a repeat performance of what he did. But you look at this team, it's going to be the last hurrah for some of these guys, because after the season, Strome's up, DeBrincat's up, and again, Robin Lehner is up. Eric Gustafsson is going to want a big money deal. Will Chicago be the team to give it to him? Time will tell. But some things have to change, but there's no doubt in my mind they could be back in the playoffs this year, and it's likely to be the last hurrah for Corey Crawford. Again, Cam Talbot goes back to Calgary, and this was one of the trades, one of the big head scratchers of the day. I genuinely don't understand it. Now, look, he hasn't been bad in the past, pretty much ever since he went to Edmonton and proved he was a number 1, a 917, a 919, dragging that team into the playoffs. From there, though, it dropped off, and then last year was absolutely abysmal. And you can say, excuse me, by the way, you can absolutely say, whatever the hell you want in regards to Edmonton and Philly, 2 non-playoff teams, and you're not wrong. However, banking on Cam Talbot at $2.75 million. I know it's only a 1-year deal, but good luck. Good luck. If you're going with Talbot and probably Riddick, good luck. Do I like the Talbot-Riddick tandem more than I like Smith and Koskinen? Yeah, but the goaltending situation in Calgary, I mean, it's not as if you were necessarily going to throw your hat into the Bobrovsky sweepstakes, but, something's got to happen, because you had a great year and you collapsed in the first round, and you really can't afford to waste that much time. You have some contracts where if you use some assets, you could move them to be able to make a big money deal, but it would be a shame if, again, goaltending is their weakness on paper, which it's going to be. But again, the playoffs, the goaltending was the strength and everything else sucked. So I don't know what to expect out of Calgary next year. Ryan Murray gets paid a lot of money. And he is very happy that Artemi Panarin left, as he should be. Now, Ryan Murray has dealt with injury problems, but I don't necessarily agree with what you're seeing there being $4 million money. Again, good at moving the puck. Defensively, it's a little bit shaky. You have those injury concerns, although he was good when he played last year for the most part. I don't know, man. But they had some money to burn. They still have some money to burn, and that was after also signing Gustav Nyquist. So you can't fault that defense. They still have to sign Zach Werenski, but I don't know what to expect out of Columbus next year, because Korpisalo and Merzlikins are your 1-2 punch, which is fairly ridiculous and scary, really. But I don't hate the Nyquist signing. 5.5 over 4 years. I mean, last year had a pretty damn good year in total, was decent in the playoffs. The 1 goal kind of hurts. But, again, you had money to spend. And while Gustav Nyquist isn't exactly our Artemi Panarin, not too many players are, the offensive contributions, it's going to help. It's going to help kind of fill that void. Noel Acciari to Florida, which is really only notable because they overpaid for him. Like, I love Noel Acciari, and we have a couple of Bruins signings to talk about, his immediate replacements, but yeah, it's not great. Matt Duchene to Nashville, which we all kind of knew was going to happen. Habs fans had the outside hope that maybe, just maybe, he was going to go to Montreal, but nah. 8x7 takes a pay cut to go, and I mean, it's Matt Duchene, man. It's Matt Duchene. Nashville making moves. Obviously, the Subban trade earlier. When you look at this team, it's interesting to see, who's going to stay, who's going to go. But I mean, when you look at the squad, they are absolutely still contenders this year. The defense takes a little bit of a hit by losing Subban, but I am intrigued to see what Dante Fabro can do this year. Steven Santini might be worth it on the third pairing, but yeah, Nashville's going for it again. And you're looking at another team where it's just playoffs, championship or bust, really. First Bruin to talk about, Brett Ritchie goes to Boston, which actually a little bit more than I was expecting. You compare him to Noel Acciari, it's I mean, $1 million for one season. We'll see. I mean, the Bruins have a lot of options right now, especially if they're not going to trade David Backes. You're looking at some question marks for this lineup. They also signed Pyro Lindholm, but you look at this team, I mean, they still have to sign Heinen, Carlo, and McAvoy. But between guys like Kuhlman, like Lindholm, like Ritchie, and some of the younger guys like Frederick, Bjork, Oscar Steen has an outside shout as well. Ryan Fitzgerald, who just re-signed, maybe even Anton Bleed and Brendan Gaunce. I'm intrigued to see who makes this team. Peter Solark has a pretty good shot as well if they sign him. Keith Kincaid goes to Montreal. He's better than Antiniemi, but yeah, I don't know, man. He's probably a safer bet too than Charlie Lindgren, but you need to hope for more of this version rather than this version of Keith Kincaid. Connor Clifton resigns with the Bruins, which, oh God, yes, that's such a good contract. I don't know if they have the stats up for Connor Clifton. They don't, but I love Connor Clifton. I sung his praises all through the playoffs. He so quickly established himself. I know he only had 1 point in 19 games, 5 and 18 in the playoffs. He so quickly established himself as a true top six defenseman. It came out of nowhere. 5th round pick of Arizona. Nobody expected this out of Connor Clifton. But, it's like you look at what he did last year, 13 points in 54 games out of the NCAA, and then second year here, does really well, gets a shot due to injuries, and kills it. Absolutely kills it and gets rewarded for it. Andy Mile returns to the Arizona Coyotes organization. Former Portland Pirate, by the way. I loved getting to watch Andy Mile play hockey. He's an offensive dynamo. The issue is he is 5'9", which might be generous, but I'm intrigued to see if he can stick with Arizona. It's a two-way deal. Time will tell, but it's just kind of cool that Andy Mile is back in the NHL. Again, kind of already talked about Pyro Lindholm. 2-year deal, though. I'm intrigued. It's cheap, though. And you look at what he did with Toronto last year, and then, of course, getting traded to Winnipeg. We'll see, but I like him more than Brett Ritchie, we'll say, at least when you see those numbers. And Brendan Gaunce as well, who was in the minor leagues with the Canucks last year, did pretty damn well in the AHL, but hadn't really been able to, stick out a spot or carve out a spot for himself and stick with the Canucks last year, unlike that, year prior where he had done at least decently. Colin Wilson to Colorado. I think I already talked about and showcased his numbers, but yeah, again, Colin Wilson, underrated, very underrated. $2.6 million for 1 year at 29 years old. Damn good contract for them. Joe Pavelski, and for that matter, Corey Perry to the Dallas Stars. It's insane to think that Joe Pavelski is no longer a Shark. $7 million over 3 years, and yeah, this puts Dallas into one hell of a spot. Now, Pavelski's numbers last year from a defensive standpoint, not exactly ideal. You look at him over the past 3 years, though, it's a little bit more kind. The Sharks last year, in general, were not a good team defensively. It's just kind of crazy that Joe Pavelski isn't there anymore. That's really all you can say. It's a big get for the Sharks, and with the Corey Perry signing, and actually here we'll just go take a look at what the Corey Perry signing, $1.5 million, show me kind of deal. We'll see what Corey Perry still has in the tank. Anaheim had no choice but to buy him out. But I think with what Dallas has done here after losing Matt Zuccarello, they've recovered well. Now, Martin Hansel is likely to go back on LTIR, so they have a little bit of money to work with that'll probably go towards signing Dickinson and Honka. You still have Ben Bishop in goal, who should have won the Vezina last year. I'm sorry, he should have. He was the best goaltender in the league. That defense is still spotty. Lindell, diver or not, Klingberg is obviously on one of the best contracts in the league, and the emergence of Miro Heiskanen helps. But what are you going to see out of Honka if you re-sign him? What are you going to get out of Jamie Alexiak? And I think the big X factor is Andrei Sekera and what he is going to be able to do on this prove-it deal. I mean, as far as who you have here, Joe Cicconi's coming in from the NCAA. We'll see. Ben Gleason had a chance to play last year. Gavin Bayreuther and Dylan Hetherington, Nicholas Hansen, they have a little bit of NHL experience if they bring them back up or, re-sign them. But it's interesting for Dallas because, again, that forward core, you look at the top four there, Cogliano's still not that bad. Blake Como, Janmark, Rupe Heinz was great. It's going to be interesting. Dallas is very much in a win-now mode, though. Very much so. Sergei Bobrovsky to the Florida Panthers. Again, maybe a little bit too much money, maybe a little bit too much term, but the Panthers had to go for it, and they are a team very much with playoff aspirations, as they should have. That forward core is strong. Everyone knows Sasha Barkov is one of the best players in the league. Hoffman, Trocheck, and Huberdeau still on very good deals. That defense has gotten better. If they don't make the playoffs next year, especially with Coach Q leading the way, it's going to be a massive failure for them. I don't think it'll fall on Joel Quenneville. Of course, he'll have time to turn this team around. But yeah, it's kind of playoffs or bust for Florida. Wayne Simmons, a 1-year, $5 million contract, a prove-it deal on New Jersey. I don't mind this for New Jersey. Simmons, based off of his play last year, and especially based off of his play while he was in Nashville, not exactly worth that contract. But for the Devils, it's a part of a push to make sure that Taylor Hall re-signs, because if he doesn't, right to the back of the line. No doubt about it. But the addition of Simmons, Kyle Palmieri is still one hell of a player. Of course, you get Nico Hischier and a certain guy named Jack Hughes, number one. The addition of PK Subban, which that defense is pretty strong, admittedly. We will see, though, the big X factor here in terms of them making it back to the playoffs, Corey Schneider and Mackenzie Blackwood, who I would expect to be the starter this year. Now, a lot of people, and I think maybe it's perhaps because he was overshadowed by a younger goalie in his own division, but a lot of people let Mackenzie Blackwood fly under the radar. He had a 902, a 918 in the NHL last year through 23 games. If he can do that again through 40 games, through 50 games, the Devils are going to be a playoff team. And that's the crazy thing. I mean, obviously at some point, I'll have a video out closer to the beginning of the season. But if you look now in the Atlantic, Boston, playoff team. Buffalo, they have aspirations, but I don't know. Detroit's still not going to make it. Florida, playoff team or bust. Montreal, playoff team or bust. Ottawa, back of the line. But Tampa and Toronto, playoff team or bust. In the Metro, Carolina's still a strong team, but it depends solely on the goaltending. Maybe if it goes poorly, Alex Nedeljkovic can save the day. Columbus, we don't know what their goaltending is going to be. New Jersey, very much in the mix. The Islanders, we don't know yet, and we'll be talking about Varlamov soon, obviously. The Rangers could be a playoff team. The Flyers, if Carter Hart can do what he did last year, they're back in the playoffs. Pittsburgh is a shit show, so we don't yet know what they're going to be. And Washington should make it as well. The Eastern Conference is such a toss-up. Not that the West is any easier. Chicago, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota. There isn't one team in the Central who doesn't have playoff aspirations and arguably should miss out. Every single one of those teams should arguably be a playoff team. And in the Pacific, it's really just Anaheim and Edmonton. Los Angeles as well, I suppose, where it's like, yeah, you're probably not going to make it. Vancouver could. I think they're likely to be the odd ones out. I mean, if I had to guess, obviously it's the Pacific with just 3 playoff spots and 5 to the Central next season. And it's between Arizona, Calgary, San Jose, and probably Vegas for those spots. That is going to be a very, very tough division unless someone from the Central highly, highly underperforms. I just realized I don't have a certain contract up top here. So let's quickly go to Pittsburgh and Jim Rutherford. The Brandon Tanev deal. As if As if I just spit everywhere. As if Goodbranson and Jack Johnson weren't enough. Brandon Tanev signed the worst contract of the day. 6 years at $3.5 million. Let me show you Brandon Tanev's numbers. Let me just show you that. Penguins fans. Let's compare him to, I don't know. Let's go back and look on Pittsburgh. Brian Rust is a little bit too good. How does he compare even to Zach Aston Reese? Penguins fans, be happy you won 2 cups, because you might not see another one in the Crosby era unless Jim Rutherford goes. And again, I've never seen someone seemingly want to be fired like him. That's what it feels like. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame now, and it feels like he wants to be fired. It is possible to dig your team out of this mess, but it's getting more and more difficult by the day. And while it seems humiliating and demeaning, eventually there comes the time where you're going to say, Grandpa, we can't let you drive anymore. Give me your keys. I think you're there with Jim Rutherford. No disrespect to a Hockey Hall of Famer who absolutely deserves it. But that is now 3 brutal moves that has set the Penguins back to the point where if they don't make the playoffs this year, I will not be surprised. Because I said that, they'll take first in the Metro. Speaking of the Metro, Anders Lee, 7-by-7. Rumors that he was going to get over $9 million. Habs fans relieved that he did not. For the at the very least, the Islanders did not lose their captain yet again. So you have that going for you. You have a little bit of money left to sign Dow Cole if you want to, and Beauvillier, and that is about it. The big question, you kept Jordan Eberle, but, are you going to have certain players kind of step up this year and make this squad defensively? If guys like Ryan Pulock can continue to step up, but what are you going to get out of Varlamov and out of Greiss? Because, hey, Varlamov's your goalie now, man. $5 million, 4-year contract. When he played last year, he was okay. The year before that, he was good, but then you look back, and it's hit or miss. If you get the good version, the healthy version of Semyon Varlamov, you're still in a decent spot. But, it feels like a step down from Robin Lehner, and obviously the feel-good story isn't attached to it. So, as nice of a story as it was for the Islanders to make it, are they going to make it again in terms of the postseason? I don't know. Tyler Myers to Vancouver. Again, this contract could have been a hell of a lot worse had the Roberto Luongo recapture not gone through. I don't hate it, I guess. Look, if you're asking me who I would have rather gone for, I've already sung Jake Gardner's praises in this video. You should have given that money to Jake Gardner, but you didn't. We'll see what happens with Tyler Myers. He's 29. He's a bigger player, a taller player, and they tend to slow down. Zdeno Chara, I would know. We'll see for the Canucks. The bottom line is it helps your defense because people seem to obviously hate one Derek Pouliot. And, no denying Tyler Myers, a bit of an improvement on him. The Canucks also let Ben Hutton go. Probably would have maybe kept Ben Hutton just for his shutdown ability. But if you look at this defense now, Edler, who signed that deal, Myers, Tanev, of course the rumors won't go away, Stetcher, Jordy Ben, who I had a tab open about, but again, 2 years, $2 million, that's honestly not that bad. Jordy Ben had a pretty good season last year, especially from a shutdown standpoint. So I don't hate the Canucks defense at this point, and obviously the X factor is Quinn Hughes, who, much like Cale Makar, is the real deal. It depends on what you get out of Markstrom. I still don't know if from an offensive standpoint this team has enough to make it to the playoffs, although the JT Miller acquisition certainly helps. JT Miller is pretty damn solid from an all-around standpoint. And Sven Baertschi, if he can stay healthy, you got a shot to make the playoffs. You do. And if you don't, you get another relatively high pick. I think Podkolzin was a steal at 10. A lot of people had him slip, of course, because he didn't have a good point total, which is ridiculous. Things looking good for the Canucks. And the good thing is, hey, Jim Benning spent a lot of money on free agency, but in my opinion, he's signed worse deals in the past. So We'll see. We'll see. Brandon Peary resigns with Vegas. My only request to the Vegas Golden Knights, for the love of God, play that man. Play him, please. 18 points in 31 games. Give that man a shot, or let him go to Seattle when they are a team. Calvin Pickard to Detroit. I saw a lot of Red Wings fans happy about this, but he's the third goalie behind Jonathan Bernier and Jimmy Howard, so not sure how happy about it you can be. Timo Meier resigns. A steal. You want to talk about a steal? You want to talk about a fleecing? That would be one Timo Meier getting the contract that he did. A force offensively. $6 million over 4 years. Pasternak-esque. That is one hell of a contract for Timo Meier. Kenny Agostino goes to Toronto. A lot of Leafs fans happy, considering he had 13 points in 27 games for the Devils. We'll see if he even starts off on the Leafs. As a former Bruin, I hope for his success, but time will tell. He's 27, and who knows what the hell Mike Babcock's going to do. And then again, Joonas Korpisalo is the man. He and Elvis Merzlikins in Columbus. It's kind of scary. So for the Boston Bruins, I mean, you get a couple of bottom six signings. Move David Backes and don't trade Torrey Krug, for the love of God. For Buffalo, no major moves to speak of as of yet, and I gotta be honest, I don't know if any are coming. They have players to re-sign. Outside of the Jimmy Vesey acquisition, again, there really isn't... Well, you know what? I can't say no major moves. The Jimmy Vesey acquisition, the Colin Miller acquisition, you get Brandon Montour last year, it's looking okay. The main issue is that Carter Hutton wasn't the goalie you were hoping that he was going to be, and that you can't rely on Zach Bogosian to stay healthy, and Marco Scandella's a plug. I love Marco Scandella, but he's a plug. Are they close to the playoffs? Maybe, but are they close enough in an uber-competitive Atlantic Division? No. And the Metro is arguably still too strong for them to sneak in. I mean, you think about the tear they went on last year, big reason as to why Jeff Skinner got the money he did. We'll see. We'll see. But still work to be done for Buffalo. For Detroit, again, no major moves at least that come to mind, for me at least. Time will tell. I mean, again, the Filppula deal isn't that bad. You move on. Steve Yzerman is now in charge. It's going to take some time. For sure, they signed Patrick Nemeth as well. It's going to take some time, but obviously the starting pieces of that core, they're already there. With guys like Larkin, Mantha, I mean, I don't hate the squad. Philip Zadina will probably be on the roster full-time, but Florida's going for it. Montreal's going for it. Ottawa sucks. Tampa going for it. Despite losing JT Miller, they still have to re-sign Braden Point. Toronto's going for it. Carolina going for it, but what's their goaltending going to be? Columbus going for it, but what's their goaltending? New Jersey going for it. What's the goaltending? The Islanders going for it. What's the goaltending? You see the theme. There are so few teams where you can say, yeah, they're not going to be a playoff team next year. The only teams I feel confident in saying that about are Ottawa, Detroit, and Anaheim. But even Anaheim, John Gibson. Edmonton, Connor McDavid. It's so tough, man. There's, you hear the term parity thrown around a lot. This league is close. There are going to be a lot of teams next year, come April, very upset that they're not in the playoffs, because very few teams had the excuse of, oh, well, we shouldn't have made it. I'm going to call it there because my jaw feels like it's about to fall off. I thank you if you made it all the way through what turned out to be, I guess, a podcast. But yeah, if there are any other moves, it'll be shorter, quick hit videos. But there was so much to talk about, and I fell way too far behind. But I wanted to talk about everything. Again, if I missed anything, let me know down in the comments below. I will get back to you. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye.